Welcome to the last session of the conference today. My name is Marnie Peichel. I'm an architect. I've been doing work with the City of Lakes Community Land Trust for the last 10 years or so. And I'll be presenting along with Bobby King from Solar United Neighbors. And we'll be talking about sustainable building and how can we do it in a time when we have a lot of rising construction costs. So some of the things that we'll be talking about is like the funding challenges we have, specifically with our funders and as they relate to green building requirements, energy reduction through building design versus adding renewable energy sources to our projects to create energy. Looking at how the Inflation Reduction Act funding might be applied to some of the work that's coming up and how we might tap into that. And then and then Bobby will kind of take over and talk about solar opportunities and some of the funding mechanisms that allow that to happen. So first of all, why do we want to build green? So I think the number one thing I always think of as it relates to our land trust is that we want our owners to have a sustainable and affordable operating expense for their housing, not just the initial purchase price. And so finding a way for that to lower costs, that as they live in the house year after year, we can bring down energy costs. Right now, lower income people have like 3 times the energy or the cost burden for energy than other households. And so it's important that we look at not just the initial construction or the initial purchase and rehab, but how is that going to be maintained long term? Looking at energy justice benefits for low income communities and how we can bring some resiliency to the communities as a whole by making their long term experience in the home more affordable as well. It's more comfortable to live in. If we have better HVAC systems, we have less drafty homes, it's insulated better, it's a nicer place for people to live. It's better for the planet. We've all been hearing a lot about climate change and how that, and buildings are a huge part of the carbon emissions, and so anything we can do is good for that. And then also, lastly, many of our funders require that we include green building in our projects now that go beyond what normal code is. So some of the funding requirements. So I'm speaking mostly from my experience working with the City of Lakes Community Land Trust in Minneapolis. And so how many of you are from Minnesota, working in Minnesota? And then there's a couple of people not. And so where are you who are not from Minnesota working?
Richmond, Virginia.
Richmond, Virginia, okay.
New York and Massachusetts.
Okay.
Boston, Massachusetts.
All right. So I'll try and I'll speak to what I know here, and then hopefully like you can kind of think about some organizations to look for in your local areas as well. But so some of the ones that we work with here are kind of nationwide or well known anyway. Enterprise Green Communities was kind of the initial sort of green layering that we had to put on, and that is a national organization. In Minnesota, we have an overlay that goes on top of it to address differing levels of rehab. The home energy rating system, the HERS rating, is becoming a very standard energy assessment model where a third-party energy rater comes into the home, assesses what is there, does a blower-door test, and then after we do our remodeling addition work or rehab, then it is done again so we can show to our funders that we have made significant improvements on energy efficiency. And then sort of the next level that's coming up now, zero energy ready homes. A lot of the work in Minneapolis that we do has stepped up from energy home levels up to the zero energy ready homes. And that's adding a layer of indoor air quality, water, plumbing efficiency to it, as well as becoming solar ready. And then sustainability certification incentives are being layered on top of that. And then, and that's typically something maybe like Passive House or Minnesota Green Star we have, or different things like that that are kind of even over and above and require extra certification. So some of the challenges that we've been finding in doing this with in the last couple of years, especially since the pandemic, 20% increases in construction costs. High performance windows cost a lot more. Adding insulation can bring a lot of cost. And then also if you're doing something like Passive House, which the City of Lakes Community Land Trust is working on getting one through right now, but hiring that consultant to do the energy modeling and like stepping through the whole Passive House project process along the way can add a lot of money for in the certification process. With this scale of development and as a nonprofit, it's hard to capture some of the energy incentives out there because of the nonprofit status. And then the small scale of development also doesn't allow tapping into some of the other bigger funding sources out there, like the low-income housing tax credit financing. Although the benefit is that we don't have to follow prevailing wages at this scale. I'm assuming most of you are working at small scale. So then, as we're developing new houses or bringing new houses into a land trust, kind of the first line of defense that we can look at is how, like through the building design, we can actually reduce energy costs. And so a lot of this applies definitely to new construction, but maybe when we're doing significant rehabs, we can also bring some of these elements in as well. So, and this, as far as new construction, looking at the site design and how can we situate the house on a lot to maximize our heating and cooling by orientation, by where we're locating windows. A lot of all of these things we can do like at zero cost, but it will help in the long run for the energy efficiency of the building. Keeping the building simple in design and structure. This has multiple layers where we're making it more efficient by having a simpler envelope. Also lowering the general construction costs by making it simpler for the builder to build, and eliminating things like thermal bridges and things that can add energy loss as well. Then the next thing, another no-cost thing we can do, or at least a very low-cost thing, is really focus on the air infiltration. That is a big, big area for losing energy, but it also requires a very dedicated effort by your contractor and or architect if you're working with an architect. And so some of the things that I would recommend there is like really kind of talking with them at the front end and making sure there's a good plan for how things are going to be sealed up, and then doing an interim blow door test in the middle and before you are fully insulating and everything. So you can make sure that you're meeting goals, because also a lot of the funders' goals have very low air exchange requirements, and so some of our contractors are not used to doing that yet, and so it's important to kind of educate them as well as in what we need to hit at the end, and then make sure there are steps along the way in order to make that happen. Another big move that's happening maybe in the last year or so is this move towards electrification, and we can provide a lot like lower energy costs to our homeowners if we are starting to look at using things like heat pump water heaters, heat pump heating and cooling systems. And that also allows us to bring or to reduce down to one single fuel and not have to have a gas line come into the house if you're out in a rural area, not having to deal with propane or other fuel sources. Another thing that's sometimes difficult to do because of our public bidding processes that we often have to go through for funding is if it's possible to be working with a contractor on the front end of your development and being able to weigh costs of different wall type systems, maybe amounts of insulation, product sourcing for windows, things like that, because it can vary a lot from location to location. And then we can kind of design around and make the best bang for our buck of what works with the place you're building as far as supply and labor as well. And then if at all possible, if you're going for some of the higher energy efficient design like passive house, there is a new track that you can go through called the prescriptive method rather than the performance. And so that is more like a code where if you do X, Y, and Z and all these things, you don't have to do the energy modeling, and can be a lot of expense saved and a lot of time also in development from going back and forth with them. So those are some things about the building. And then when we're looking at funding and we're hearing about IRA funding coming up, so what is the IRA funding? It's was a law that was signed in effect in August of 2022 for the Inflation Reduction Act, and it's $500 billion in new spending aimed at boosting clean energy, reducing healthcare costs, and increasing tax revenue. But so 80% of that is really focused on funding that affects the climate and efforts to address energy reduction. So, and then clean energy and the transmission of it are a big portion of that. Another goal that has been highlighted with the Inflation Reduction Act funding is that a lot of money is being allocated towards environmental justice priorities, and so and making sure that it's distributed in an equitable manner. So, and then one other thing about in my research of learning about this is that the majority of this funding is coming through tax credits, and so that becomes like a difficult thing to figure out. How do we get this funding as a nonprofit and as a non-owner of the house? But they do have, as part of it too, as part of these tax credits, there is something new that is happening with it called direct pay or transferability, but it does not, and this change allows a nonprofit to get a direct payout for the tax credit, even though they're not filing, but it only applies to renewable energy projects. So not to general construction, but Bobby will talk about that more later in how it relates to solar projects that we might be doing. So I've been researching like where are the sources that we can tap into with the IRA funding, and what are some typical sources in general that we use for funding new development and also rehab development. So as far as new development, and specifically in the Minneapolis area, we've had the city has been supportive of doing like higher end sustainable work through their incentive program, and that means you need to get certification for passive house or other things like that. So maybe there might be something that your cities are doing specifically to increase environmental building as well. The city also has what they call the Green Cost Share program, and that one is strictly a matching program. And so we can submit to the city what we're doing that are sort of over and above things, improving, putting in heat pump water heaters that are not the typical or standard thing, or adding additional insulation that's over and above standard. And then they will be kicking in up to $40,000 per unit in what we're doing there. And then energy companies are another one to look at. Here we have the Excel Solar Rewards program, and they're dealing with like solar installations on homes. And then there's the rebate section that as nonprofit organizations we can tap into when it comes to development. we have Excel and Centerpoint, the gas company, that both can give us more significant rebates instead of what a typical homeowner would get. But especially Centerpoint has a nonprofit affordable housing program that they do that is a little bit more comprehensive, and so we can get a lot of different credits built up through that. And tax credits are hard to deal with as the nonprofit. We can't do the direct pay or transferability, but there is one coming up over the next 10 years for new construction that builders can apply for. And it's like $2,500 for Energy Star, which has kind of been the standard for a while, and moving up to $5,000 for zero energy ready homes. But so I think there's kind of the tricky thing of like, how do we work with our contractors to realize this cost savings in our overall development when it has to kind of go through them and not through us. And then financing, I think this is sort of an up and coming option, but a lot of through the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, they have the federal government has put a lot of money into this that is being funneled through states. And so, for example, Minnesota has voted to set aside $45 million of their funding to start a green bank. And so these green banks will be specifically focused on lending in order to make sustainable projects happen in lower income communities. It's not up and running yet, but that's something to look for as we go forward. And then, so moving on to the existing home side of it, and I've found that there's a lot more through the IRA funding that is available in this realm, but it gets a little trickier because then the homeowner is really the one that is having to sort of derive that and how that can happen. So there's still, when we're doing existing homes, like in the city, we still have options like the Minnesota Green Cost Share Program that as an organization you can apply to, or the solar rewards with the energy, Excel company. But then there is also the Weatherization Assistance Program, which is run through the state. But this one, again, is something that as the developer or the nonprofit, we cannot apply for, but the homeowner could. And so there seems to be a very significant amount of money that is being put into this program as opposed to how it was funded in the past. So again, this is run like through the states. And so that'll kind of be it's still rolling out now, and we'll be able to see how that happens. But there's a process where the homeowner would then apply to this program, get an assessment of their house, and then figure out what they could possibly get, depending on income levels and things like, to upgrade their homes. And it can include things such as a new furnace and some really big items. So it's something to look at. And then the next two categories, again, rebates and tax credits, are all about the homeowners being the only ones that can apply for them. So there are, again, the energy companies, high efficiency electric homes. There's a lot of things in the IRA funding that's geared towards electrical fuel source. And so there's a lot of incentives out there if you're, for example, upgrading from a gas furnace to a heat pump heating and cooling system. There's some pretty hefty rebates. And then the IRS has tax credits for individual homeowners as they upgrade different appliances or systems. There's electrification tax credits that a homeowner can go on Rewiring America, this website, and I'm sure that Bobby will talk more about that, but it's a website that you can use as a calculator to find out, depending on your income level and things, how much you can qualify for in different incentives that revolve around electric appliances and systems. And in some cases, especially with a lot of our homeowners being 60% of AMI or less, like you can qualify for 100% of rebate on some of these items. And it's my understanding that if working with contractors, that the homeowner could have like no outlay, where all of that is done through the contractor installing the new product and working with the rebate. And then residential clean energy credits against solar, and then the Green Bank again, but that would be organizational application. So in looking at these things, I've been kind of trying to figure out like how to look at this, as it seems to split between new development opportunities and existing home opportunities. And again, coming from the land trust where it's fairly large, we've got 375 households existing, then it's kind of becomes this question about, if you're developing 1 or 2 new homes a year versus you have 375 in your land trust already, and the IRA funding is really targeted towards existing homeowners. When we're talking about the smaller scale housing, then how do we sort of realize some of this money that's coming down the line? But that's the harder direction to kind of get going. So some of the challenges, I think, and what it would take to get current homeowners that we have in the land trust able to take advantage of some of these things that are coming up. I think there would need to be a lot of collaboration between homeowners, CLTs, contractors, and lenders to kind of come up with some comprehensive program and how we could get that working. Contractors would have to be willing to work with the rebates a little bit more and kind of how they would pass them on to homeowners, and also deal with new technologies. We have a lot of the HVAC contractors are sort of on the edge of learning about heat pump stuff. And so some of them are really up on it. Some of it are kind of shying away from it because they don't know if it works or not. But finding people who have had experience with that is a good source there. And then also, I'm not sure about this, but if there's funding in the IRA for organizations to hire technical assistants that might be able to fund maybe a greater coalition of land trusts in the state or something, so that a program can be designed to assist homeowners and kind of help bring some of these smaller rebates up through that. And so I did a little bit of looking around to see what are some organizations that might be doing that. Locally, we have the Center for Energy and the Environment that might be a starting point, and NeighborWorks Home Partners, who has been looking at how to tap into the IRA funding a bit. Rewiring is a national organization and resource that we can use to kind of find out what people will qualify for. R2E2 is Residential Retrofits for Energy Equity. It's a national organization based out of Chicago, and their mission seems to be to to help organizations consolidate and help homeowners, to help develop bigger programs that could work with many homeowners at once to try and bring some of this funding to lower income communities. The EPA has it seems they have some support services as well as in working on getting grants put together, designing programs, and how to develop projects that can be delivered. And then I think one of the biggest sources as it continues to roll out would be the state energy departments, because a lot of the money is coming from federal through the states to our local communities. And then so after everything is done for the house to make it more energy efficient, then we can kind of look how do we provide renewable energy as well. And there does seem to be a lot of a lot more funding that's kind of going in that direction. So in the past, with the City of Lakes Community Land Trust, we've kind of started to do a little bit. But I would highly recommend working with a local solar partner in doing this. We've worked with Innovative Power Solutions, like back in 2015, we did 2 homes. And then we did, it's in process right now, we're working with Cooperative Energy Futures to put a solar array on a large 7-unit condo building. That one should be up and running in spring, hopefully. But both of those situations, we had the organization help us with applying for funding. We did not bring money to it, but the organizations can then tap into incentive programs locally and things like Minneapolis Green Cost Share program. And then a purchase power agreement is arranged so that the owner of the home does not pay their electric bill, like directly through the electric company, but through the organization that has set it up. So, and then at a reduced rate, they'll be able to recoup kind of that savings. So, and then like the one new thing in this IRA funding, that law that passed allows the nonprofits to do the direct pay realization of tax benefits. And so that does apply to solar projects. So, and then I'll let Bobby take over because he's the solar expert.
Thanks, Marnie. If I sit, will that work for folks? Okay. Tell me if I need to stand. So my name's Bobby King. I'm the Minnesota State Director for Solar United Neighbors. I'm going to talk a little bit about who we are, a little bit about how solar works, because I think the way solar works makes it a good fit for land trust homeowners. And then how the work we've done with One Roof in Duluth and City of Lakes in Minneapolis to get some of their homeowners solar. And I think we're on the verge of some things changing and be able to ramp these numbers up in the next year or two. So just how Sun got started, in 2007, Anya Schoolman, the woman there with the glasses, her son Diego, to her left there, saw Inconvenient Truth and said, "Mom, we got to go solar." And she said, "Sounds good." And what the city told them they could do, what different electricians told them they could do, they got lots of different answers in 2007. So her sensibility is to engage people, to organize. She lives in the Mount Pleasant neighborhood of Washington, D.C. They got about, I think, I don't have my little notes below, but about 150 of their neighbors together, and a group of them met over a period of a couple of years. It took them to figure it all out. And by the end of it, close to 100 of them went solar. And the story made the papers, and she started getting phone calls, and she ran it out of her home for a while, and then turned it into Solar United Neighbors, the organization. And I just share that story because we're grounded in engaging people. We think that when you're working with folks, that's how you get stuff done. When you're engaging people and helping figure out the problem together, that's how you get more done, and you get things done that have more longevity. So we work all around the country. We've helped 8,000 folks go solar through these buying groups that we do. I'll say a little bit more about them later, but we really have a model of doing around and figuring out what went wrong, what went right, and perfecting it as we go. So we've dealt with lots of installers, encountered lots of headaches, and found ways around them. This again, some of the numbers, but there at the bottom you see we've done 188 installs with low-income homeowners around the country in different states. And that's something we've, over the last 4 or 5 years, have started dedicating a lot of our time and energy to. And part of this, and this goes to back, this will go a little more into this when we talk about how solar works, but we really want to see a distributed energy system where more people are energy producers because then more people benefit from the energy system. And we want this really centered in equity. So it really does matter who owns the solar arrays, and trying to figure out what are the barriers to BIPOC communities, low-income communities, being a strong part of this and centering that as much as it can be is something we've really started spending a lot of time and energy on. We've done 22 installs with the One Roof and City of Lakes here in Minnesota. These are the states that we have a person like me in. You know, we help folks all over the country, but in these states, we have someone that's doing these group buys and doing a little bit more nitty-gritty work. Sorry, these states, Puerto Rico and Washington, D.C., yeah. Last thing about us is kind of we've developed this theory of how we think about our work. We want to help people go solar. And from that, we want to learn about what works, what doesn't work, you know, what made it easy, what made it hard. Bring those and other folks together, and then work for policy that makes more solar possible. You see HOAs is one of them. HOAs are a big barrier to solar in Minnesota. So we passed last year a law that says HOAs have to allow solar. And figuring out ways that we can get the investment we need into distributed energy and solar so that equity and low income and BIPOC communities are able to fully benefit from this opportunity. So I'm going to try to do basics of rooftop solar, and I think I changed that to 5 minutes in my notes. 3 might work. It'll be interesting. And please interrupt me if you have questions or stuff to add. So here's the basics of a solar system, rooftop solar. You have a solar array on your roof, or we've done some small ground mounts up in Duluth. And actually, we did one for City of Lakes, a small ground mount. And that will produce direct current. So that direct current goes to an inverter, which turns it into alternating current, which is what you use in your home. That goes to your electrical panel. And electricity is drawn to, it wants to be used. So it's going to go to the closest use. You got your electric stove on, your light on, your heater on, your hairdryer on, your fridge on, and you need that electricity in your house. It's going to go right into your house before it goes to the meter. You know, so this is behind your meter so far. But it's a beautiful day in Minnesota. It's 70 degrees. Your windows are open. You're not using much electricity. You're going to be producing way more than you need right at that moment. So that goes back through your meter and onto the grid. So solar is really about 2 things. Rooftop solar, it does create some self-sufficiency on your end. You're creating more of what you use, but you're also sharing your excess with your neighbors. Your closest neighbor that has a draw is going to be the one that uses that renewable power you produce at your property. So you could see a panel broken apart. You got the panel, put them together, you make the solar array. Key thing to know about panels is that it's a very durable product that's being improved constantly, but it's standard in the industry to have a 25-year warranty. So it's a long-lasting product. That's what's called a production warranty, and it'll be a percentage number. So common one would be like 91%. And what that means is that on the 25th year, it will produce the same amount of DC power it did on its 25th year as it did on day one. So it's a product that manufacturers have strong warranties behind and feel good about. The product warranty, free from defects, that's at least 10 years, and more manufacturers are trying to extend that to 25 too, so it matches with the production warranty. And they're like, if you get a hailstorm, it would be likely that your panels would not be damaged when your roof is damaged. They're very, very resilient, very strong.
What's the 91% then?
So the 91% is what's called a production warranty, and it means that And it's for 25 years is the standard. If it was 91%, it means on the 25th year, it's producing 91% of the energy that it did on day one. So your degradation has been 9%.
Gotcha.
Yeah. A more mediocre panel would be 85, but it's going to be between 85 and 94 for a decent panel.
A plus to an A minus.
Yeah, that's all pretty good. And actually, this new breed of panels, they haven't been up for 25 years. So we'll see. They could mostly all do better than that. Lastly, they work better in the cold. So while we have less sunlight, they get the benefit of having that cold temperature. Racking is something people are really nervous about, horror stories in the early days, but this is a very mature industry that has standardized products for every type of roof. It's very rare to have a problem with leaks on your roof. Most installers will give you a 1-year warranty, a 1 to 5, we've even seen 10 years on their workmanship around installs. And this is just an example of some of the different types of racking they have for different roofs. But for every roof, there's something. No installer's getting up and scratching their head and like, I guess I've never seen this before. What do we do? The inverter is what converts it to AC power. One key thing about the inverter is it will, through an internet signal, send out both to the homeowner on an app how everything's working, what production is, are the inverters working, how the panel's doing. But the installer also will have that sent to a computer that they have. An installer will often know there's a problem with your system before you do. So one thing we discovered with low-income homeowners is if they're not sure they're always going to have a reliable, strong Wi-Fi system in their house, we want the bid to include a cellular card for at least 10 years so that the signals, this important information, is being sent to the homeowner and installer via a cellular signal.
Sorry, Bobby, the homeowner pays for that cellular card on a monthly basis, or?
That'd be part of the price of the install. Yeah, it's built in. Yeah, so it's just for 10 years. We want it to be for 10 years. And yeah, there's a little card you buy from the company, you put it in. Yeah.
We added that on the Minneapolis Homes project, it was $400 a house.
Yeah, that's a good ballpark number. Yep. Just some frequently asked questions to know about. We went over the warranties. Insurance. Some insurance companies are great, others aren't. People are going to want to shop around if they want to jack your insurance up really high because of solar. I've always found that people can find a solution, but it's something to be aware of. There's no such thing as a no maintenance project, but it's a low maintenance. There's nothing that you need to do to make it work. You can leave the snow on it and the snow slides off. The production you lose from not clearing the snow is very low because we have such little daylight hours in Minnesota. When we do financial modeling and the industry does financial modeling, they expect systems to last 25 years. They'll probably last longer. We'll find out. And now HOAs in Minnesota have to allow solar, and more states are passing provisions like that. Any questions about that? Yeah.
Sorry, if you're gonna get into this, but there was a term up there at the beginning, net metering.
I'll hit that.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll hit that in a little bit. Yeah. So, when I got this job about 3 years ago, I really wanted to figure out a way to make sure that when we do our group buys, it would work for low-income homeowners. And I lived and worked for a number of years at a homeless shelter in DC called the Community for Creative Nonviolence, and in Duluth at the Loaves and Fishes community. So just the dignity of housing and being sheltered and being able to build from that is important to me, and it's important to Son. And I really thought it was a good fit. I knew Jeff, the director of One Roof, thanks. Because he was at Loaves and Fishes when I was, and Brooke, who I work with now very closely at One Roof, had been at Loaves and Fishes. So that was fortunate to have that connection. And Jeff from One Roof introduced me to Jeff at City of Lakes. So there was a good introduction there because, hello, I'm here to help you get solar is not, I mean, people have other stuff they're doing. And this can be a lot. So I really am grateful for those partnerships, and I think we've done a lot together. But why it made sense to me for there's a benefit to the homeowner, obviously. Their energy burden's reduced immediately as soon as the system goes on. It increases the home value, and I'm finding a lot of the folks that come in have wanted to go solar for a long time, didn't know where to start, didn't think it was possible. There's a lot of pride in getting that up on your home. And again, benefits to the community. We want to see an energy system where all of the renewable power isn't being produced by a huge solar farm owned by Xcel Energy. We can create a system where more people own the production and then more people benefit. And that's what this does. And that's what community land trust homes do. It benefits the person, it benefits the community. And then it really is a low risk, high value product if you can figure out how to get it to work. There's very little chance that it's going to be a disaster. But then what are the barriers? High upfront cost, like a 7 kilowatt system, average size system for, Minnesota's gonna run, $25,000, maybe a little more, maybe a little less, depending on your situation. It costs about $3.50 a watt to $3 a watt. The key incentive that solar installers really use to sell solar is a federal tax credit of 30%. So 30% of the cost of the solar you can take as an income tax credit. But if you don't have an income tax burden that makes that worthwhile, it doesn't get you there. Key thing to remember about that, though, is that rolls over. So if you do get it and you can't use it, it's there until your situation changes and you might be able to use it later. But it doesn't help you get the solar up. Even incentives that happen at the time of the installation are not paid until after you interconnect to the grid, typically. Most solar installers need a pretty substantial payment when equipment is ordered. So how do you float that? And then this is for anybody that wants to go solar. Just understanding where you start, how solar works, what's up with it. There's a mind-boggling amount of information on the internet that's geared towards selling you solar no matter what. And there's a lot of great solar installers in Minnesota, but scammers use solar to scam, and there's some scams out there. A little bit about our buying groups and how we worked with the 2 CLTs to get solar up. So the first thing is we call our buying groups solar co-ops. They're not a legal co-op. It's a group of people working together to get a better price. Once the purchase is, once that round's done, that thing doesn't exist anymore. And in Washington, D.C., where we were founded, co-op doesn't have as robust a meaning as it does in D.C. So that sometimes creates confusion. But really, the key to making our buying groups or our co-ops work has always been partners that can get the word about the opportunity out in the community. And for low-income homeowners and CLT homeowners, One Roof and the City of Lakes, working mostly with Shang at City of Lakes, has really been a fantastic partner and gotten the word out to their homeowners, and their homeowners have gone through the process. So the principles of the solar co-op or buying group, or why it helps in this situation, is you're having installers bid on a group of business, a large pool of business, so you get a better price. I'm meeting with the solar installer weekly after they're selected, fielding any problems, working out any kinks. We're an advocate for the solar co-op member for the homeowner who's purchasing solar. A lot of people like doing it with other folks. learning, sharing stories. We have in-person meetings and webinars. And a lot of people that go solar like renewable energy and want to be a part of a group that's helping advance other policy, the sense of doing it in community. This is just the overview of the timeline. The main parts are, we do solar 101s, which are pretty, hour and a half meeting about how solar works and how this process works. And then invite people that go through that to be a part of the solar co-op or buying group. And then the key thing is a group of self-identified members of that buying group are the ones that will select the solar installer. We have a very robust process for putting out an RFP for bids. We like to get at least 3 bids. In the Twin Cities, we usually get about 5. In Duluth, we get 3. Staff really go through them and check facts and make sure everything's accurate. But then a group of the co-op members ultimately review that with staff and make the decision about which installer is the best fit for the co-op. And then everybody that joins, as long as they do a little bit of follow-up with the installer, will get a bid at the co-op price. This is all free, there's no obligation. For every contract that's signed, Sun gets $600. That's part of our agreement with the installer. It's not passed on to there's not an extra line item in the bid for that when people go to pay. The savings are around, I think, 10 to 20% usually, and then you've got the help from us too. So just for CLT homeowners, the benefit to them is the solar education. Got me or other Sun staff you're working with as an advocate for you. You're getting an installer that's been vetted. You could feel good about the installer you're getting a bid from. You get the lower cost. And here's the one of the most important keys that I actually discovered by accident. The first time we did this, I retroactively said to the installer, hey, we got an issue. Will you work with us? Now we ask up front. But we want the installer to commit because they're getting a pool of good business to say for, 5 to 10, we'll make up a number. We want you to have a contract that will work for these low-income homeowners, which means a low and refundable down deposit of $100, and that any upfront incentives that the homeowner is going to get, that you wait to receive payment on that until they're paid out. So we don't have to get any kind of bridge loan or stuff like that. So just here's some of the homeowners that have gone solar with us. This is, I think they did the first round with us up in Duluth, the Barclays. They got a 7 kilowatt system. I'll talk a little bit about it. Minnesota Power has a small pool of money you can write grants for, and they got funded that way. That array covers most all of their usage. This is Jessica Tank in Minneapolis. And again, I heard a lot of talk about stacking incentives for doing your mortgage down payment. So in Minneapolis, that's what we're doing. There's several different pools we pull from, and I'll go into them all a little bit more. But XL has 2 different pools she was able to tap into. Minneapolis has the green cost share. So she paid in $1,000. That's roughly her energy bill, her electricity bill for a year. So her payback period is a year, and now her electricity burden is pretty much covered for the year. Yeah.
Any idea what level Jessica was at from an AMI standpoint that enabled her to receive that level of assistance?
Yeah, I'll talk about it a little bit more, but at that time, and hopefully it's going to change, it was you have to be on energy assistance. Not I'm qualified for it and I could get it, but you have to be getting it, which turned out to be a real headache that we've hopefully changed.
Hey, Bobby.
Yeah.
On these scenarios, can you talk about what their annual energy budget was versus the size of the array? kind of know how much coverage they were getting?
Yeah, you know, I could. I have that information, but I could not find it last night when I was looking for it. I found it for one person. So I can guesstimate these. So Charlie's, Zeke's 7 kilowatt system, I'm pretty sure that was 100% of his usage, like 105% of his usage. Xcel Energy caps you at 120%. If you want to get any of their incentives, you can't size your system more than 120% of your usage. So I'm pretty sure Charlie was just a little bit over 100% on this 7 kilowatt system. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. And he used the Xcel Energy and the Minneapolis Green Cost Share and paid $2,500 out of pocket. That's probably like a 2.5-year payback for them. Yeah, this is Alexis and Elijah Feltus up in Duluth. So that was smaller system, that's all the roof would handle, was 4.1 kilowatts, but that was 71% of her usage offset, which isn't always the same as your bill because there's fees and stuff tacked on, so of her energy burden would be a little less than 71% when you look at the fees that are tacked on. And that was through a Minnesota Power grant, and she paid $1,000. Oops. Yeah, and there's 18 or so others that we did too. So again, the biggest incentive that installers are always pushing that everyone qualifies for is this federal tax credit, which applies to a panel upgrade if you need it. It applies to batteries if you get batteries. But if you're lower income, it just is not useful to you. These are the incentives that we're using or hope to be using soon that are coming online. So Minnesota Power, they're up in Duluth and north. They've got a pool of about $150,000 you write grants for. And we've tried to use that when we can. Xcel Energy has something called Solar Rewards. It's got an interesting history. When Prairie Island Nuclear Facility was at capacity, Xcel built that promising never to store waste on site, that it was going to go to the national repository that for some reason nobody wanted to host, and they couldn't force a Native American tribe to take it. So they were at capacity, and there was a big movement to shut it down. It was going to be shut down, and there was a closed door, last minute deal, literally. Senate and House leadership went into a room with Xcel executives and came back out with a deal that would allow them to keep it open. One of the key part of that deal was that Xcel would pay for every cast they added into a pool called the Renewable Development Account that would be used to transition Minnesota to renewable energy. So this solar rewards money that Xcel administers comes out of that pool. And last year, the legislator increased the solar rewards pool to $11 million and said half of that's going to be for low-income solar. So all of a sudden, they dramatically increased the amount and very dramatically increased the amount that will go to low-income folks. Minneapolis has a green cost share program, and a part of it is dedicated to solar. Solar for All is part of the IRA. I'll talk about that a little bit. That money hasn't come online yet. And then, as Marnie was saying, businesses can get a 30% tax credit. And in some situations, there's adders. If you're in an energy community, if you pay prevailing wage for the solar, if it's made in America, it can stack up to like 50, 60%. Nonprofits now can get that as direct pay. And we're working with One Roof on a system, on a model where One Roof would own the solar for 5 years, lease it to the homeowner at little or no cost, so that tax credit could be captured. Then after 5 years, it would go to the ownership of the homeowner. But the Xcel Energy program, their solar rewards programs, currently pays $2 a watt. Solar is around 3 to 350 for a watt, so there's a big gap there. And you had to be on energy assistance. And then you had to go get a document notarized that said it was okay for Xcel Energy to ask Commerce if you were on energy assistance, even though it's right on your Xcel bill that you're on energy assistance. It was a really challenging process. A lot of folks, they would qualify for energy assistance, but it's a long time to get on it. By the time they got on it, the money was gone. Or you can't apply all year round. It's closed a lot of the year. So we've been telling Xcel this system doesn't work. Xcel has agreed, and the state's in the process of finalizing this, to increase the incentive to at least 275 a watt. We'd like to see 3. We're still pushing for 3. And then expanding eligibility to energy assistance, to Section 8 vouchers, WIC, MA, and also this looks like it'll happen. If you're a community land trust homeowner or you're a Habitat homeowner, you will qualify. So making it easier for people to demonstrate they can get they qualify, and making the amount enough so that if they do have to borrow, the amount they have to borrow doesn't put them so much in the hole. It's not worth doing. They can't afford to do it.
Will still need to be notarized?
I don't think so. I don't know. Yeah, we're seeing. I mean, when's the last time anybody had anything notarized? I'm like, do they even still notarize stuff? Does that even exist? I mean, the only time I've done it's when I bought a house, ever. Yeah, that I could think of. The green cost share for solar it's a group buy program where one of every five that get it has to be in the green zone or a qualified low-income homeowner. And being a City of Lakes homeowner qualifies you and for this 40 cents. What they do is they pay a certain amount for your estimated first year of production. So if you're in a land trust home, they pay 40 cents for your estimated first year of production, your kilowatt hours.
Did City of Lakes have to lobby to get that?
I asked them to do it, and they did it, actually. That was how that worked. Yeah, pretty easy to work with. I just said this would help, and they said, great.
Can you
We'll
come
do it.
down to Rochester and ask or for you to do something like that?
We'll try. Yeah, I don't mind asking. And then we have asked people getting the 20 cents to chip into a pool that we use to help folks where we need a little extra money. And a lot of folks are up for doing that. This is the green zone, just for those who aren't familiar with it. It's 2 areas within the city that the city has determined are higher levels of BIPOC, low-income communities that are disproportionately impacted by pollution, and they want to put resources into that area to rectify that historical injustice. So if you live in the green zone, you qualify for a higher payment. Just here's the numbers on, this would be for Minneapolis. You figure a 5 kilowatt system at $3.25 a watt. And the things that make system size vary is how high is your roof? How steep is it? Do you have, 2 dormers, so it's got to have 2 little arrays on each side of it? Just how complicated is the install? And like I said, we see between $290 to $350 for rooftop typically. So that system would cost $16,250. They'd get $2,500 from the green cost share if they live in Minneapolis. And then this is the $275 a watt. If they got that, they'd get $13,250. And so that would leave them paying $500. And if they didn't live in Minneapolis, if they lived in St. Paul or Carver County or Washington County or anywhere else in Xcel's service area, the person would need to come up with $3,000. The EPA Solar for All. So I hope this ends up being exciting. The federal government put a lot of money into solar dedicated for low-income folks, $7 billion. And states, tribal governments, cities can apply for it. Also, nonprofits can. Minnesota put in $100 million. You do it in $100 million. Governments do it in $100 million increments. So Minnesota put in for $100 million. Their application was due today. It's going in. And they'll know in July who gets awarded what, and then they'll start implementing that money. So what we've told Minnesota is that you can't finance your way into getting solar for low-income folks. There has to be some grant money on the table. It's just the numbers don't work. And this program requires that they demonstrate 20% savings, bill savings. But what the right thinking states are going to need is folks that work with low-income homeowners to help them design something that works and to get the opportunity in front of them.